Hi, it's Rob Levy again with the Rob Levy Real Estate Team here in Portland, Oregon. I wanted to talk to you today about 5 buyer tips. Now, I know I say I'm from Portland, Oregon, but this applies to anybody in the country looking for homes. Where do I come from to talk about this stuff? I've been doing this for 32 years as one of the top real estate agents in Portland, so I thought I'd share these tips with you. Number one, don't always rely on the different sources out there. There are many different companies that are sending you listings all the time. But right now, it's first come, first serve as far as getting in there and getting to see the house and starting to get in your brain as far as whether you should make an offer. And you see, when I list a house in the multiple listing service, as a realtor, I put it in that multiple listing service. It then sends it to those third-party applications. So when I get a text from somebody or an email from a client saying, hey, what about this house? If they'd have actually gotten the listing from me, they would have gotten it earlier. You see, the listing services, the multiple listing systems, they actually send it out to our clients on our behalf. So I could register you, let's say, as a buyer for 4-bedroom, 3-bath homes in Southwest Portland under $600,000, and you're going to get them from the multiple listing service before they're going to go to the third-party company, and then the third-party company put it all together and send it on to you. So whoever you're working with as a realtor, wherever you are in the country, make sure that realtor sets you up with the listings that actually come out for the multiple listing service rather than the third-party services. You're going to get them quicker. You're also going to get a lot more information. Number two, I'd have to say, is keep your expectations in check. I remember, having done this for 32 years, I've been around for 4 recessions as a realtor. And there were days where we could go in and say, we want that fixed, we want that fixed, we want that wall repainted. Those days are gone. That's just not going to happen. So if you're going to go look at houses with me or with your realtor, wherever you are in North America, the reality, and actually to the world to a certain extent, at least the Western world right now, the reality is this: you're not going to get people to do those things for you. So keep your expectations in check. If you go into a house and it looks like the people work for Sherwin-Williams and every room is a different color paint, think about the fact that, okay, maybe it'll cost me $35 or even $7,000 to repaint the place. But in the big picture, when we look at the average price of sales prices, particularly in our market, it's just not that big of a thing. Is it dirty around the edges, things like that? Those things you can take care of. Is the lawn awful? Well, it actually keeps some buyers away, so it works as a benefit for you, but it doesn't take a whole ton of work to make the lawn looking good again. So keep your expectations in check as to what you're expecting the house to look like and be like. Number 3, don't look at the top of your budget. I get it all the time. Of course, the first question, it's probably my fault, our fault as realtors, because I ask my buyers, hey, what are you looking for? Well, I need at least 4 bedrooms. I want a 2-car garage. I want a fireplace. I want central air conditioning. And oh, what price range are you looking in? Well, I need it to be less than $650,000. So I'll start looking for houses up to $650,000, and inevitably, I'll get emails or texts from my clients saying, well, let's check this one out, and it's at $649,900. Well, of course, I would never show a house to somebody that's not pre-approved with a bank, because that's setting up the wrong expectations with the buyer. But let's just say, for argument's sake, in this case, they're pre-approved, credit approved up to $650,000. In a recent survey I just did around the Portland area of other top producing realtors like myself, for the average selling price in the market of town that I work, which is around $650,000, the average one was selling for $70,000 over that list price. So if it's $600,000, on average they're selling for $670,000. That's just the way the market is right now. Is that bad? Not necessarily, and we're going to talk about that a little further down the list here. But the reality is this: you can't go into a $600,000 house and offer $605,000 and expect to get it in this market unless it backs to a freeway or something. So maybe you should be looking at $550,000 offers and going in with a $680,000, $690,000, excuse me, $580,000, $590,000, you know what I'm saying here, $600,000 offer on that house instead. So, don't look at the top of your budget. Look just slightly below your budget. Most buyers are starting to figure this out. As a matter of fact, we have a lovely couple that we're going to be selling their house and selling them another house, and they're looking up to $550,000 in far southeast Portland, and they said, hey, maybe we should only look for houses up to $500,000. So a lot of people are starting to figure that out. But that really is important, and again, that's all about setting your expectations, right? And making sure that you're not going to be disappointed. Number 4, consider alternative neighborhoods. So I've got a wonderful house on the market right now in Eastmoreland. It's just this very old, classy area of Portland, and it's at $899,900. Now, it's 1 or 2 houses removed from the very fashionable part of Eastmoreland, even though it's the same neighborhood, same legal description and everything. But a lot of those houses are $1.1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million, and they just look stately. They're just gorgeous 100-year-old houses, there's no doubt about it. This house offers more than what most of those houses offer, but it doesn't look as appealing from the street. But it's got an in-ground swimming pool, it's 6 bedrooms, 3 levels, 4-car garage for $899. Well, obviously that's a much better buy than the ones in the main part of Eastmoreland, because you're going to get more house for your money, and that's something to consider. And it's going to be, let's say, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 less than the equivalent house in the true main part of Eastmoreland. That's just one example. The point that I'm making is that if you're looking in neighborhood A and neighborhood B you'll consider, and neighborhood C is out of it completely, then maybe you should look a little bit into the A-B neighborhood, a little less A, a little more of the B, and buy yourself a house there. You're going to be much more happy getting a lot more house for your money in most cases, and certainly won't be busting your budget. So that I'm asking you to do is just consider alternative neighborhoods. Number 5, and this is probably the most important, which is sweeten the deal. Now, what do I mean by sweeten the deal? Well, when you're making an offer, we need to make it look attractive to the seller. Literally just moments ago before coming onto this call, I got a call from another agent who I know well, who is going to be writing an offer on one of my listings. And his question to me is, Rob, what's important to your seller? Your agent should be asking those sellers' agents, what's important to the seller? And I said, hey, look, these guys are selling this house. They're going to move into the country. In an ideal world, closings these days are taking 30 to 45 days unless you're paying cash. In an ideal world, what we'd be asking for is maybe a month or 2 of rent back for free. So that would allow my sellers the 45 days of pending closing time, and then maybe another 30 days or 40 days, or maybe even 60 days on top of that of free rent back. Well, that's an incentive to the seller. Now, as I said earlier on in this conversation, couldn't have gotten away with that years ago. But in reality, we're trying to sweeten the pie to the seller. So if these buyers came in and said, here's the price, and by the way, you can live there for free for a month, what's that going to cost those buyers? Maybe $2,000, $3,000? That's nothing in the big picture of the purchase of the house. So that's something to think about. That's one option. Another one would be disclosure revocation. So in Oregon, like in most states in the country, there's property disclosures that the seller has to fill out. They can be 1 or 2 pages, or in our case, there's 7 pages. In California, there are even more. And all of those forms have to go to the buyer. Once the buyer receives those forms, and there's questions on there like, did the roof leak? Yes. When? Yeah, when's the last time the air conditioning was serviced? Things like that. All of those questions are on there. Once the buyer is in receipt of those forms, they have, in Oregon at least, 5 business days to revoke their offer if they don't like what they see on the form. The key being what they don't like what they see on the form. It can be anything. You can basically back out of that offer because your hair is gray. I mean, there's no reason that you have to state why. You can just back out because of the revocation. That simply makes it too easy for buyers to back out. So if you want to sweeten the pie for the seller, maybe you should consider revoking your right to back away from the disclosure statements. So in other words, you'll get the disclosures, but you can't use that to back out of this transaction, which is going to make you look like a stronger buyer with the seller, which is going to make the seller consider your offer maybe more than another one. Now, is that dangerous? Yes and no. Here's the no why. The no why is because I would never recommend that you don't have a home inspection. Home inspections are incredibly important. You need to have a home inspection, even if you say we're not going to ask the seller to do any repairs. Or maybe another way is saying we won't ask the seller to do any repairs more than $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on the price range of the house. And we do that all the time. We'll put seller to do no repairs costing seller more than X. Let's say $2,500 to round the numbers off here. Now, that does mean that the buyer still gets to have a home inspection, and the home inspection may come up with a ton of stuff wrong, and the buyer at that point has the right to just back out of the transaction and get their earnest money back, or possibly they could go to the seller and say, look, things have changed. We didn't really expect this to come up on the inspection. Would you be willing to work with us? So even though we've previously said we'd only ask the seller to pay this much, you see the law in most states, and you need to check with your realtor in another state if you're watching this outside of Oregon, the law in most states says that if the seller is aware of a problem, they have to disclose it. So if you make the seller aware that there's a giant leak behind the dishwasher that's leaking into the basement or something like that, or the crawl space, the seller now needs to disclose that to the future buyer. So it seems to make a whole lot more sense to work with you, the existing buyer. So you are protected as a buyer there. So repair cap. The other thing is an appraisal clause cap. So let's say that you're buying a house for $500,000 and they're asking $450,000 for it, but you're paying $500,000. Well, what if the bank appraiser said it's only worth $450,000? One of the things you can do there is say that you would agree to pay the difference in a low appraisal up to XX dollars. So you could say, I'm offering you $500,000 for your $450,000 house, and if the appraisal comes in at $450,000, I'll pay $50,000 extra, or I'll pay up to $25,000 of that, or whatever. Now, if the appraisal comes in $100,000 low or something, that's where it gets dangerous, when people completely waive the appraisal clause, because if it comes in $100,000 low, you could be stuck with buying the house and then coughing up the $100,000. But in most cases, in most states, and again, check with your realtor that you're working with or with a real estate attorney or something, in most cases, at least in Oregon and California, where I'm licensed, that's simply not the case. So there's a couple of things going on here with what I just talked about. Number one is that, let's say the house, you're paying $500,000, they're asking $550,000, but it only appraises for $400,000. Are you stuck with that $400,000 appraisal? Not necessarily, because generally speaking, at least in our state and in California, I know where I'm also licensed, you can actually walk away from a transaction as long as you're willing to forfeit the earnest money. So your biggest risk is going to be the earnest money. In Oregon, you can walk away from a deal right up to the last second before closing, and the only thing the seller can come after you for, this is for a buyer of course, the only thing the seller can come after you for is the earnest money. So theoretically speaking, if that $450,000 house that you offered $500,000 on came back in at $400,000 on the bank appraisal, you'd probably want to get another appraisal, because there is the certain thing like, hey, if a buyer's willing to pay that, it's probably worth it. But if that actually happened, you could walk away from the transaction, walk away from your earnest money, lose that $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, whatever it is you put down. I realize that's a lot of money, but that would get you out of the transaction unless things were written differently. So those are my 5 major steps that talk about, things that buyers need to know right now in the market. And it is a seller's market. So you do need to sweeten the pie for the sellers if you're a buyer. And we've written a lot of offers on houses where people have done these, and there's been competitive offers and multiple offers, and we've won those offers because we've structured the offers this way. So those are the 5 steps that I think you need to know. Please subscribe to my videos, and also if you have any questions, we've been doing this since 1988. We've sold an awful lot of houses. We've seen good and bad and big and small, and happy to share all of our experiences with you to help you sell your house or help you find that perfect house. Thanks so much for watching the video, and feel free to forward this on to a friend too.